There's a storm across the valley. The clouds are rolling in. The afternoon is heavy on your shoulders. There's a truck out on the 4-lane, a mile or more away. The whining of his wheels just makes it colder.
Welcome to Community Forum. Today is March 22nd, 2022. My name is Priscilla Almquist-Olsen, your host of Community Forum, and it gives me a great deal of pleasure to welcome to our program today the retiring Executive Director of the Ames Free Library, Uma Hiremath. Hiremath. I said it. Okay, Hiremath. And Uma, it's such a joy to have you, and you have been such a joy to so many of Easton residents. They know you, they love you, and you have performed so beautifully, creating so many wonderful programs for Easton residents. And I should call you Dr. Uma Hiremath because you got your PhD, interestingly enough, in political science. Well, that's dear to my heart. And then you got your Master's of Science in Library and Information Science. So tell us a little bit about how did it all start? From your childhood, perhaps?
Priscilla has asked me to look at a camera there, and I just can't, Priscilla, because I can't see your face. I'm going to have to talk, because while you're talking, I have 100 thoughts just flooding my brain when you talk about those great programs at the library. It's wonderful being an executive director of this library because there's a golden staff, a golden board, a golden town. Everybody does the work and I get all the rewards, so it's a great feeling.
Great. It is. It's where the community connects.
It's where the community connects.
Did you have an inkling in your childhood days in India that someday you would be a director of an American library?
Well, like every other child, I think in any part of the world, you decide you're going to be king of the heap wherever you are. And I think I must have changed career paths in my mind 100 times. Mm-hmm. I always thought I would be a diplomat when I started off life, and I thought I'd join the diplomatic services like the rest of my family. But instead, life took on a life of its own. And
so you thought you would follow in the diplomatic footsteps of your family. Was it your mother or your father? Or?
No, it's just a clutch of uncles and aunts.
Uh-huh.
My mother was an educator. My father was in the army. So we've had, a lot of different strains. But as I said, at some point I said, hey, I got a teaching fellowship to come to the University of Pittsburgh back in the day. And I said, let me try it out for a year and see how it goes. And 1 year became 2, and 2 became 3, and 3 became 10, and before I know it, it's been almost 40 years.
Oh my goodness, 40 years in America. Pittsburgh is a wonderful place. The university is a wonderful place, and I've been there, and they have all of those rooms dedicated to different nationalities.
Yes, the Cathedral of Learning, yes.
Did you ever have a class in the Indian room?
The Indian room was not there when I was there.
Oh, it wasn't? Okay.
But I did have classes in some of the other rooms, and as you said, Priscilla points out, it's called the Cathedral of Learning, and it is so fabulous. You walk into each classroom and you're in a different country.
Right. Right. So I see from your resume that you started out in New York City, or the New York Public Library.
I started my library career at the New York Public Library. Mm-hmm. So the first part of my career was all in academia, and then again, life took its turn, and I had 2 daughters, and I was completely absorbed in them. The weird part is, as a child, I never played with dolls. I never thought I'd have children. And then after about 7 years of marriage, I had my first daughter, and I took one look at her, and I said, I want 12 of these. I was completely smitten. So I actually took about 5 years off, at the end of which I was going insane. So I walked into the New York Public Library, one of the branches, and they were looking for trainees. And it was just one of the spur of the moment things like, you always say, I love libraries. You never know what's going on behind the scenes. But everybody loves libraries, and I was one of them. And I said, let me try this out. And that's another moment of change for me because I could not get enough of it, Priscilla. Working in a library in New York City is quite an experience. The first time I came to Massachusetts, and one of the library patrons who came in and said, thank you, I stopped for a minute, because you don't hear that in the New York Public Library. You hear a lot of four-letter words instead. But for somebody who was coming from academia, this was fascinating. I thought I had stepped into a soap opera, and I couldn't get enough of it. It was like life with a capital L. So I thoroughly enjoyed my stint there. And after a point said, let me get a library degree, because this looks like a career that I could really be invested in. It had taken all of me. So,
well, I can see that perhaps some of your creative juices were formed in that experience in New York Public Library.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I have a lot to thank.
Yes, and then you went to West Orange.
Then I moved to West Orange for a short bit, which was great because then I got the big library experience, which is the huge New York Public branches and all sorts of services. And then went on to the small town West Orange Library, which was a completely different experience because there you're doing everything. Perfect experience before coming to Easton.
Right.
Right. So
because, as you say, small libraries have the directors performing so many more tasks beyond the description of an executive director, right?
Priscilla asked me what my first day at the Ames Free Library as an assistant director was.
Shoot.
I vacuumed. I vacuumed the old place. There used to be a branch at the Whistle Stop branch.
Oh, okay.
And that had closed up. And, I still remember, I said, this is interesting. So that was my first day at the Ames Free Library. But, it was Madeline Mealy-Holt was the director at the time. And Madeline and I, we always said we're married. We could finish each other's sentences and each other's thoughts, and we just got along like a house on fire. So
yes, you were quite a team.
We love each other, yes.
Yeah. And she is the one that coined that expression, the library is where the community connects.
Absolutely. I mean, Madeline is so far-sighted about everything. So she sat with the librarians. Nobody is quite sure who. It was a collective effort. But it was such a perfect byline for the Ames Free Library.
Right, and she started programs. The library had never really been, when I was growing up here in Easton, you just went, there were books. I mean, maybe there were programs for the toddlers, but there weren't programs for adults. You know,
Priscilla, you've hit on a very good point, because programming for public libraries meant children's programming, story times. Every public library had story times for its children. But adults are children at heart. I mean, we need storytelling, we need communication, we need getting together, we need this whole magic of conversation like we're having. And a public library is so perfectly situated to do that. So Madeline and her merry tribe at the time, getting this where the community connects, I can't think of a more perfect byline.
So who managed the acquisition of Queeset House?
Now, everything has been a joint effort. I mean, there's so much of alchemy. It was, I know the exact moment. Queeset House already belonged to the library after its long attempt to expand the physical building, which did not work out. And fortunately, I missed that whole period. When I joined, the library owned the cottage, the little pink cottage across from the main library, as well as Queeset House. And we were not quite sure what to do with both buildings. And I still remember the first day I came in, they were talking of Queeset House being a children's library, and my heart just shrank because I said, I mean, the children's night, you need a sense of comfort and sloppiness. And everything about Queeset House is classic and elegant. So there wasn't a perfect role that, sort of just gelled. Then we won the first finalist for the Best Small Library in America from the Gates Foundation and the Library Journal back in 2012. And Madeline and I went to Philadelphia to collect the award. And I still remember getting up in the morning in our hotel room, and we were looking at the list of programs that day. And there was a program on a new type of library in Denmark, in Aarhus, the second largest town in Denmark. And we said, should we go for that? I'm so glad we went, because that was the turning point. It just went ping, you know, it's a learning commons, a maker space. This was way ahead of the time when it had really caught on around the nation. But the fact that Queeset House has 17 rooms, and that each of these rooms can be used to literally parlay people's hobbies and interests into groups, it's perfectly
Well, you know,
situated for that.
the Nordics have always led the way in lots of ways.
No bias there, Priscilla.
I know I am biased. But so
that's how it started.
Okay, and then how did some of these programs, which one doesn't think of as belonging to a library, like the beading group, and the quilting group, and how did those start?
So as we said, it was anyone who comes into the library and has a hobby. We say, can you get 2 of your friends, 3 of your friends, 5 of your friends? And our first group was actually the knitting group. And I have to give a shout out to our staff member at the time, was Kathy Corona. And Kathy started, I mean, she was brilliant at anything to do with crafts, and she started the knitting group with, I don't know, 7 or 8 people. And they used to meet up in the main floor of the main library, and you could hear them laughing all the way down in the, downstairs. And I said, you guys are having way too much fun. And that group just grew and grew until it came to twice a week, 2 different groups, and it spread out. Debbie started her, each staff member started picking up their hobby. And so there was the beading group, the embroidery group, the quilting group. And here's the magical part. It's not just the creation of that craft. They started selling their things that they produced. With the money that they got, the quilters bought 10 sewing machines, including a computerized machine. So it would look like a sweatshop. You walked in and there are these 10 machines and everybody's busy with that. And here's the sweetest part. They had over 3,000 products that they donated to nearby hospitals, NICU units, the disabled and limbless veterans, and that continues to this day. So even though Kathy is no longer a staff member, last month she went and distributed more quilts around the region, and people just carried on during COVID times.
That is wonderful.
Yes.
The one thing that I really enjoyed was the media room on the 2nd floor of Queeset. And I do hope that now that COVID is coming to, hopefully, a pleasant end, maybe we can have some of those programs. I remember Patrick, who showed me how to transfer negatives and slides onto a thumb drive or a disc, and then how I could take a VHS tape and put it on a machine and put it on a thumb drive or a disc. And then Dana helped me set up eBay.
Yes.
Of course, I haven't used it yet. I mean, this is 3 or 4 years ago, but I hope to. And but she was just wonderful.
She's wonderful.
And these people just volunteered their time.
So it's a simple secret, Priscilla. Everybody has a skill. Everybody has a skill. It's the old Montessori philosophy of life. Everybody has a skill. And we are social beasts. We like to share. We like to learn. The idea is we're all lifelong learners, and your public library can provide that for you. And all it is doing is picking you up with your skill and presenting it out to everyone through our marketing and our space. And we support it through materials so that you can get at least 5 people to come and share with you. The 5 becomes larger and larger, or it doesn't. It's an organic process.
Now, I remember also that you connected with other groups in town. For example, the Easton Garden Club. And what was the title of that?
Books in Bloom.
Books and Blooms.
Oh, my favorite exhibit, yes.
And so, a member was given a book, and they had to express that book in a floral arrangement, and it was
So smart.
so
So
interesting
smart.
and so much fun, and
Yes.
and beautiful to see. Also, you would an artist. I think you did something with the boxes behind. You put what was that all about? Where you
boxes?
no where you had glass.
Trying to think. We do have
Behind glass, there was some kind of demonstrations.
So we have a lot of, we have an ongoing artist exhibit area.
Yes, that's what I meant.
So we have the walls of the main library, and here I miss Carolyn Cole, whom we lost recently, because Carolyn pushed so hard to get local artists to exhibit at the library 10 months of the year. And each artist was given a month to exhibit. And we get 300 to 500 people a day coming in, so they get a lot of exposure that way.
Now, the other thing that's so interesting is the artist in residence.
Yes.
And that really is artist in residence, because that
Yes.
artist lives and breathes at the Queesit House on
Absolutely.
on the third floor. There's an apartment.
Priscilla, that's my absolute favorite moment. And it started, and I'm so happy I brought this book. It started because Kate Kleiss, who's a children's artist, who's a children's author who's written more than 30 books and lives up in Missouri, she had written her latest book, and our children's librarian, Mimsy, tweeted about it, saying, Kate Kleiss's latest is out. Sitting in Missouri, Kate wrote back and said, hey, I just looked at your webpage. You'll have a beautiful library. Thank you for tweeting about my new book. And she sent me the email. And I wrote back, and she said, if you ever need an author in residence, I'd be willing, because your library looks beautiful. And I said, funny you should say that. We have a little haunted house next to the library. If you're interested, why don't you come and give a talk? I thought she was local. And she said, well, I'll have to drive down from Missouri. And that's how it started. And she came for 1 whole month. And to this day, I say, I don't know how you live alone in Queesit House at night, because...
Oh, especially since the word is that Queesit is haunted.
It's definitely haunted. So the authors, after Kate, have started a little book. So after they finish their stint there, they write their ghostly experience in that book. I think it adds to our urban legend. But now Kate has come regularly, and we love her to bits. And this is an Eastern story, Priscilla. I hope you've read it.
Oh.
Does that look like our historian Ed Hands?
No.
Well, that is Ed Hands.
Is it?
That is Ed Hands. So it's a lovely story, because Kate was here as our author in residence.
Yes.
And I happened to recount a story about Ed Hands, and Ed had told me how he had got stuck on the slides in the middle school. And I said, what were you doing up on the slides? He said, well, I have a bucket list for my dog because she's old, and one of them was going down a slide with her. And that story so charmed Kate that she furiously got to work and started writing this wonderfully sweet, tender, and my all-time favorite read.
Oh my goodness.
Which is called Stay, and it's about a little girl and the big old sheepdog.
Yeah.
And she has a bucket list for the sheepdog.
Well, and who produces that book?
I'm not sure, but we certainly have copies.
Tell us the author again, so we can look it up on
Kate
Amazon.
Kleiss, K-L-I-S-E.
C-L-I-S-E.
K-L-I-S-E.
K-L-I-S-E.
I'm just going to hold it up right here so people can see it.
Kate Kleiss.
Kate Kleiss, and I'm not kidding, Priscilla, I have got 10 of copies at any given time that I give out to people, because grown-ups are reduced to tears by the end. It's just one of those sweetest, it's a classic.
Well, Ed Hands has been honored again, and he has authored so many books. The Eastern Neighborhoods, which is out of print now, and
Right.
and other books. And so have you. I noticed that you have written 2 books.
It's actually one book which is on its 5th edition. I just completed the 5th edition of that book, and it's a textbook. It's very boring. If people have insomnia, they should pick it up, but otherwise library students around the nation are being forced to read it, yes.
Yes, it's called Reference and Information Service. And then the other one is called Nationalism and Foreign Policy.
Nationalism and foreign policy was my PhD thesis.
Oh, it was.
So it's unpublished dissertation.
And then you have a myriad of articles written, but also presentations. So let's see, so it goes back to 2001 through 2019, where you participated in panels and you made special speeches and presentations.
You know, Priscilla, we had so much fun setting up Queeset House, and it was such a runaway success that I just got invited to talk about basically Queeset House.
Oh.
So in my latest edition of the textbook also I have a picture of Queeset House, and I did not bring it with me, but there's a recent book on public libraries. It has about 6 images from the Ames Free Library, because this whole concept of having people produce knowledge in their public library is such an attractive one. So I've presented not just nationally, but I was invited to, let's see, to Aarhus, Denmark.
Yes, I
which
know.
was wonderful because I told them you inspired us. So that was great. So it's been in Aarhus, Denmark. It's been in Sharjah, the United Arab Emirates. The American Library Association had a conference there. So I did present there. In Uzbekistan, all over Uzbekistan. And that was just a strange coincidence because our textbook was translated into Uzbek, the Uzbeki language. And so the State Department needed some kind of soft diplomacy to...
So you were sponsored by the State Department?
That's correct.
Right.
Which is great because then you travel in style.
Right, so you really traveled. So where do you feel home is?
Home is where the heart is, Priscilla.
I know. I had a feeling you would say that.
This is, I have stayed in Massachusetts the longest in my entire life, which is 16 years. I changed 12 schools as a child, so.
Because your dad was in the Army.
He was in the Army, so
Yeah.
it's very much a very pathetic existence. And I'd always planned for myself that every 5 years I'm going to move on, you know, as my career path, even in libraries since I came to it late, was every 5 years, I pick up skills, I get experience, I move on to the next one.
Well, you have certainly contributed so much. We are so appreciative. Eastern residents just love you, and they love the programs that you've set
Very
up.
mutual, very mutual.
And you have also acquired a team of people in the library who have been so productive and so personal and given the personal touch to everybody who comes in. You know, they lead by your example.
No, Priscilla, not by my example. I mean, I'm not saying this lightly, but remember this board together have almost 200 years of experience between them. It's been a very consistent board of directors.
Yes.
It's
And that
it's a
also
privilege,
is important
to have-
because that
absolutely
is your strength and support.
Not only just strength, it's impacted on every resident of Easton, because if you look at the average around Massachusetts, every resident has to pay over $30 a month for public library services. Thanks to the Ames family and their initial generosity, and thanks to this board that has been fiscally so great, guess what an Eastern resident pays for their public library services? Not just the books, and not just part of being a consortium of books that you can get anything, but the space, the garden that the CPA has helped us, you know, restore. For everything, guess what a resident pays every month? Less than $2, less than a cup of coffee.
Oh, okay.
It's amazing. Easton is blessed in so many ways, and the library is definitely one of them.
And speaking of the Queeset Gardens and that wonderful stage that Winthrop Ames brought Catherine, what was her name?
Hughes, yeah.
Huh?
Kathleen Howard and Hughes,
Yes.
Leslie Howard. And
All these famous people, actors from Broadway, because he was a Broadway producer of over 200 productions. And he lived in that house. And
did.
he created the gardens. And when I was growing up in Easton, I didn't even know that there were gardens there.
Yes.
Because it was a jungle.
Right.
And thanks to
Kath
Gloria
Holland.
Freitas Steidinger and others,
Yes.
and the gal who did her master's degree.
Yes.
Creating the gardens, restoring the gardens to their prior beauty. It's just a magnificent place. And the concerts that you have scheduled there are just wonderful.
My favorite moment.
And
Yes.
yes, and people bring their chairs and
Right.
and their bottles of water and sit there and
Yes.
munch on popcorn because you have a popcorn machine. I mean, how great is that? So,
Yes.
tell me about your vision for yourself now for the future. You're retiring, but I feel that you cannot sit still.
So interesting you should ask. But first I have to tell Easton that the team is in place. So there's a lot of excitement coming, a lot of new skills, a lot of new energy. It's going to be a very exciting place at the library. It's going to continue in a grand way. So I'm really looking forward to the next 5 years. But for myself, as I said, I fell in love with Easton and the library and never moved out of it for 14 years. So I want to spread some of that, and an opportunity came up through an Easton resident, Paula Vogler, who keeps going to all sorts of places and setting up schools. And they have set up a school in rural Kenya for girls. And it got me very interested to try and set up a library for this girls' school in rural Kenya. So I am heading out end of June with Paula's team to try and see what I can do in terms of a library in the school. So
Okay, and what town in Kenya is that?
I don't know the details. She said it's 6 hours from the capital. So
From
this has
Nairobi.
all just been happening. It's just over the last 24 hours.
My goodness. I knew you couldn't sit still. And so you're going to bring your expertise and you're going to create a library for Kenyan
hope so.
girls.
I hope so.
That's
I
wonderful.
hope so.
Well,
It's got me excited.
I also hope that you take advantage of some free time to relax and enjoy,
will.
do some traveling to places that you haven't been to.
Absolutely.
And we wish you all the best and all the luck in the world. Thank you so much for
Priscilla.
joining me today on Community Forum. This is Priscilla Almquist-Olsen saying, until we meet again, stay well.
Thank you. And thank you, Easton.